Hey guys, alright, today we're going to be watching The Attack on Pearl Harbor, 1941, by Montemayor. Yeah, I think I pronounced that right. Uh, anyways, let's go ahead and start. Well, you know what? Let's talk a little bit about Pearl Harbor. I actually don't know really what to add. I mean, well, I guess as an American, I know about Pearl Harbor. And to me it just feels like common knowledge. But do have some foreign viewers on this channel. But there's a good chance that pretty much all of you watching are history people, so you're probably familiar with Pearl Harbor. So I don't know what to add before the video starts. So let's see if we learn anything new. See if he adds any context maybe that I was unfamiliar with, some maybe Japanese plans that I was unfamiliar with or something. Let's go ahead and watch.
About the 27-yard line. Cruiser Kennard made the tackle. We interrupt this broadcast to bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. Flash, Washington. The White House announces Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor.
God, that was...
Stay tuned to WOR for...
Since we're starting to get into the age where we have adults that live now that did not experience 9/11. Now, I was very, very young, too young to remember 9/11 when it happened. I can't remember that day at all. I was like 3 years old or something. So now we have adults that did not live through it. However, this kind of situation is similar to what happened on 9/11. This is how you can kind of understand some context or something, like get a better, in my opinion, this is how I get a better understanding of historical events by kind of comparing them to modern day events, and seeing the maybe similarities in reactions. But when the first plane hit one of the Twin Towers, the news stations quickly started, they interrupted everything, right? Everything got interrupted to talk about what the hell was going on in New York City. So, yeah, this attack on Pearl Harbor is rather similar in that in the news coverage, I believe.
1941, Japan situation. America and other nations have imposed an oil embargo on Japan, which means Japan cannot continue their conquests. No problem, Japan would just get the oil it needs from the Dutch Indies. Their underfunded and undergunned fleet will pose no threat to the Imperial Japanese Navy. And if their ally, Great Britain, joins the conflict, well, Japan will fight them too. Both nations are too occupied with the European war anyways. So, through their new conquests, Japan's demand for resources shall be met. However, geography has cursed them. Look at what lays beside their vital supply lines. The Philippines, a US territory. Although America is not officially allied with the British and the Dutch, they are on friendly terms. Japan cannot afford the risk of the US entering the war while they are in the midst of their campaign. Their proximity to Japan's supply lines puts into jeopardy everything they are about to fight for.
Fair.
Basically, the Americans would be holding a dagger to Japan's throat the entire time they conduct their campaign, ready to commence hostilities at a moment's notice. Thus, they come to the conclusion that they must take out the Americans as well. This calls not only for an invasion of the Philippines, but also a preemptive strike on the powerful American fleet at Pearl Harbor. And so with that, history was set. Japan set its powerful Kido Butai to strike Pearl Harbor on the morning of December 7th. Now, the goal of the raids was as follows. 1. Sink a battleship. This was for propaganda purposes.
Yeah.
Japan reasoned that if America saw their beloved battleships, symbols of their naval power, destroyed, their will to wage war against Japan would be shattered as well.
You see, that's just how you... That's Japanese leadership. They're not looking into history. The Americans don't give up over the loss of symbols. Like, the War of 1812 did not end because the British got down to Washington, D.C. and burned it. That didn't end the war. So, and you can even say then the same thing about the Russians. Them losing lots of land, symbolic land in World War I, did not end the war. Napoleon walking into Moscow did not end the war. An attack on an American naval base, many, many miles away from the mainland United States. You're an absolute idiot. Your leadership is stupid if you actually think that kind of strike would actually dishearten any country from fighting. That would not dishearten. The only countries that it would possibly make not want to fight are countries that are small, too small to afford such a loss. The United States can't afford losses to their ships, especially by 1941. So, my understanding of the Japanese battle plans has never made sense to me, because these guys are supposed to be educated, and they're supposed to be well, I guess maybe by this point they're not necessarily the best for their positions, because it put there due to political connections, as can happen with a lot of countries. But you cannot legitimately believe that such an attack would actually make a big world power nation. It wasn't a superpower yet. It was not the world superpower, but it was one of the most powerful nations on Earth at this time, actually not want to go to war. That's my response.
2. Immobilize the fleet for 6 months. The Japanese estimated that they needed 6 months to do all their conquests. Then they would be on the defensive and await the American counterattacks and wear them down, culminating in a decisive naval clash. So note, the Japanese knew they could not win a long-term war with America, so Japanese strategy revolved on them waging a
It doesn't matter if it's, as I said before, well, I didn't say that. Yes, at least they do acknowledge that they cannot win a long-term war. However, how do you plan on getting a short-term war? The U.S. has the resources to force the war into a long-term war. And essentially, that's exactly what the United States did. Their response to Japan was like, hold up. You wait there, Japan. We're going to go kick your brother over here, Adolf, all the way over in Europe. And then we're going to come back and kick your ass a couple years later. Even though that's not really how it went, because obviously the U.S. would still be fighting in the Pacific at the same time as fighting in Europe. However, it just wasn't their focus. Blah, 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 blah. They're essentially telling Japan, like, hey, give me a second. We'll be with you later once we go fight Hitler.
short-term.
Like the United States had so many resources, they could fight a two-front war and not really give a shit about one of the fronts and still win. Like, their focus was not on the Pacific.
War. This was why attacking the fuel tanks or naval facilities at Pearl Harbor was not even considered in the planning phase. It was irrelevant to the 6-month goal. At Pearl Harbor...
However, though, if you bomb the naval facilities, that cripples American ability to rebuild. So, it might have been good. And also, if you attack the fuel silos, that also cripples American capabilities as well. Then they have to worry about now procuring more fuel to replace that lost on that site.
There were some 80 ships. There were 8 battleships, 7 of them in battleship role and 1 in dry dock. 8 cruisers were at Pearl Harbor, 4 of which were accessible to torpedoes, and dozens of destroyers and auxiliaries were docked elsewhere. Unfortunately for the Japanese, the 3 American carriers were all at sea and not in port that fateful day.
Japanese intelligence reported that rarely were all 3 in port together. Most likely only 2 would have been present at Pearl Harbor. I'm surprised I guess back in the 30s and 40s they maybe not would have done this. but I don't think today you will find. I think so. I think the current setup is like one aircraft carrier and then a bunch of ships like making up its surrounding like defensive formation or whatever. I don't think you'll ever find two carriers near each other in the modern day.
The
I
attack
think.
on Pearl Harbor would be carried out by 6 fleet carriers and its strike force of 350 planes. Their crews had endured 10 months of training for this attack. In addition, 5 midget submarines would be tasked with penetrating the harbor and attacking in conjunction with the main airstrike. The attack would be composed of 2 waves. During the first wave, Lieutenant Fuchida commanded a strike against the ships in the harbor. The key to the first wave was the 50 level bombers and 40 torpedo bombers, also known as Kates. Their torpedoes had been modified with wooden fins so that they could be effective in the shallow waters of Pearl Harbor.
Wooden fins.
Their priority targets were the battleships and carriers at port. The first wave of 183 aircraft was launched at 6 a.m. The strike force approached Oahu, and soon the formation separated into groups to attack their assigned airfields and targets. The sky was completely clear of American fighters. The Japanese had achieved complete surprise.
Tora, Tora, Tora! Yeah!
The dive bombers
Words.
beat the torpedo bombers to Pearl Harbor, the first bombs hitting the southern tip of Ford Island minutes before even the first torpedo had been launched. Planes from Hiru and Soryu approached at 7:55. They were disappointed to discover that their targets, the carriers, were not in port that day. Lieutenant Nagai, leader of Soryu's air group, realized there were no potential targets, so he and his wingman pulled off. However, the remaining 6 attacked. They probably mistook the OT commissioned battleship, the USS Utah, as a capital ship, and they fired upon her. 2 torpedoes slammed into her before 8 a.m. The rest missed. One missed so badly that the USS Raleigh was hit. The Utah capsized at 8:12. The Raleigh almost suffered a similar fate, but prompt damage control prevented her from capsizing.
Huh.
Nagai went around Ford Island and launched against what he believed was a battleship. In reality, it was just a cruiser, the USS Helena. She was double berthed with an old mine layer, the Oglala. Its silhouette probably gave the impression of a battleship. His torpedo actually went under Oglala's heel and exploded into Helena's hull, damaging both ships. Nagai
How? Well, I guess the shadow maybe would have given a slight appearance of it being bigger, but still, battleships are huge.
Nagai's wingman recognized that it was just a cruiser and decided to attack Battleship Row instead. The 8 Hiru planes didn't fare any better. Lieutenant Hirata and his wingman saw that there were no viable targets, so they headed for Battleship Row. However, the remaining 6 aircraft who were lagging behind got to see Nagai's attack on Helena and followed suit. 4 launched torpedoes, but they all missed terribly.
Oh my god.
The last pair aborted their run at the last minute and headed for the battleships. So now we have 4 Hiru and 1 Soryu plane maneuvering for Battleship Row, cutting right across the path of the other 24 torpedo bombers who are just coming in. In this photograph, you can see the opening stages of
That was a cool little transition there. Yeah. That was a sick transition. The movement of the animated map into the real life picture.
the attack.
I
Both
respect
the
that.
Utah
That
and
was
Raleigh
sick.
have been hit, and Utah is listing to port. At this moment, the torpedo runs against the battleships have begun. You can even spot 2 planes finishing their bomb runs.
Oh wow. I've never noticed that in those pictures before.
Due to the geography of Pearl Harbor, the torpedo bombers really just had one avenue of approach. If they had gone over the naval buildings, the turbulence would have thrown off their accuracy and limited their launch window. Therefore, the overwhelming majority of the Cape bombers flew single file down the southeast lock. The result was that instead of the attack being spread out, it would be disproportionately concentrated on the southern tip of Battleship Row, much to
Wow.
Oklahoma.
I never thought about this, but damn. Even this naval base is strategically placed to defend. Well, of course, this is gonna make me sound so stupid, but yeah, of course they would design this to be as defensible as possible, even from air attacks. But still, like, to the extent that this is very defensible for at least the time period it was made to defend ships from aerial attacks. Because obviously, I don't think today modern planes would have much issue attacking the base, aside from the fact, it's pretty much impossible to make it past if it was a known attack, it'd be impossible to make it. But and the defenses of Pearl Harbor are certainly probably a lot better today. But God, even back then, that's some good fucking planning.
And West Virginia's despair. 12 Akagi planes approached single file, 1,000 feet apart, starting at 7:57. All of Akagi's 12 planes launched against these two battleships, except one, which skillfully maneuvered and struck to California.
Oh, skillfully.
The four
Nice.
Hidu planes from before joined shortly afterwards and launched against Oklahoma and West Virginia. Contrary to belief, the Japanese were not attacking with impunity. The defenders had taken advantage of the precious minutes warning afforded by the Fort Allen bomb blast, so that when the first torpedo planes of Akagi approached, many anti-aircraft gunners were already prepared. These vulnerable, slow-moving Kates had to make their torpedo runs under fire. 3 miles behind Akagi's strike was Kaga's air group. By now, the anti-aircraft fire was becoming more effective, and again, Oklahoma and West Virginia took the brunt of the attack. In the middle of their launch, that single Soryu plane from earlier swept in and got a hit on the California. However, one of Kaga's plane veered to the right because of this, but was able to hit the Nevada at 8:03. Kaga's air group was the only one to suffer losses. 5 of the last 7 attacking Kates were shot down.
Huh. Are we gonna get another cool transition?
this
Yeah,
historic
oh
photograph.
my god, I love it. That's so cool.
The torpedo attack is perfectly captured. You can see the torpedo hits on the Oklahoma,
Oh, wow.
West
You can see the ripples in the waves. Whoa, that's so fucking cool.
Virginia, and the California.
Yeah, you can see it. You can see the ripple wave right next to the California and Oklahoma here. Ooh, and even the Oklahoma and West Virginia. Wow. I've never gone like into looking into these pictures with such detail before. That's neat.
All of them are gushing out oil. In the background, you can see Hickam Field burning, and the Helena can be seen leaning against the Oglala.
Oh wow! Oh,
And a Japanese plane can also be spotted.
wow. Oh, and there's the plane. Shit, dude.
However, the attack wasn't executed as smoothly as hoped. An attack that should have taken less than 90 seconds stretched out over 11 minutes from first run to last.
Really? How? Well, I guess if they were expecting the carriers to be there, they didn't have to do that long maneuver around. Huh.
Some had to abort and redo their runs due to mutual interference, and the heavy anti-aircraft fire threw off the
okay.
pilot's aim and caused them to over-concentrate on just 2 battleships. 21 torpedoes were launched at Oklahoma and West Virginia, over half of the available torpedoes. Oklahoma had 12 torpedoes launched at her. 5 hit her, and she capsized in 15 minutes. West Virginia was hit by 7 torpedoes, but prompt counterflooding prevented her from capsizing, and she settled to the bottom.
Huh.
California should not have sunk from 2 torpedoes, but her hatches were open for inspection that morning,
Oh,
which
no.
contributed to her sinking. And she was abandoned due to fires, and when she was reboarded, it was too late. Of the 36 torpedoes launched, only 19 achieved hits. That's a 48% hit rate. 10,000 feet above came Fuchida and his high-level bombers. Their mission was to take out the inboard battleships inaccessible to torpedoes. They came in groups of 5. They released their salvos and scored an impressive 20% hit rate on
20% hit. Impressive when compared to what they had expected from their pilots.
Fortunately for the Japanese, out of
Japanese photograph during that note the bomb explosion Oklahoma has not yet capsized. Okay. Wow.
the 10 bomb hits, about 6 were low-order detonations or malfunctions. That is an outrageous 60% dud rate. The Japanese aviators were greatly let down by their weaponry. The damage could have been deadlier. However, the distribution was effective. California was missed, but 2 ineffective hits on Maryland were scored. Both West Virginia and the Tennessee were hit twice, and there were 2 additional collateral damage hits on the repair ship Vestal, moored outboard of the Arizona. Vestal suffered severe flooding and had to be beached afterwards. But all of these hits were overshadowed by the 2 hits on the USS Arizona. The first struck her aft on the quarterdeck, and another landed near her number 2 turret. It caused a magazine explosion, which exploded with a great force, and a tremendous fireball was seen. She split in half and sunk in the harbor, taking more than 1,000 sailors with her. Heavy fires burned for days. The explosion was actually caught on tape by Dr. Hackinson, who was on the hospital ship Solace.
I think I've seen this. Yeah. Oh my. I've not seen that. No, I've had to have seen it. I think I've seen it, but it's been so long. Wow. Hold up. Wow. Oh.
Solace.
Oh my god. God damn. "1,177 sailors went down with the Arizona. Half of all the people killed that day came from this ship alone." Wow.
Nevada was the only battleship not suffering heavy damage and capable of getting underway. She did so at 8:40 with the intention of heading out of the channel. Now, one of the mini-subs actually did make it into the harbor. The other 4 were unsuccessful. At 8:36, the sea tender, the USS Curtis, spotted a sub. The submarine fired at Curtis but missed. In return, the submarine was hit by a 5-inch shell. The destroyer Monaghan, which happened to be getting underway at this moment, saw the sub and approached with the intent to ram her. The sub turned and fired its last torpedo, which missed the destroyer. At 8:40, the sub was rammed and depth charged. She sunk with both crew members killed.
Oh, wow. That's a small ass sub. Only 2 people, huh? 78 dive bombers sent to attack warships.
167 planes formed the attack of the second wave, of which 78 were dive bombers allocated to go against warships. Much was expected from these skilled pilots. However, their performance was disappointing. First, take a moment to see what they were up against. By now, the anti-aircraft defenses were up and ready to greet the dive bombers. Couple this with the fact that there was a 70 to 90% low overcast, their accuracy was destined to be off. But most importantly, these pilots were guilty of poor target selection. This was their priority list.
Aircraft carriers.
These dive bombers with their general purpose bombs were well suited for attacking the 8 cruisers left in Pearl Harbor. But during the attack, about roughly 30 attacked battleships, only 17 went for cruisers, 16 attacked destroyers, and 12 attacked auxiliaries.
Huh. Oh.
The attack began at 8:54. The USS Nevada was caught in its escape during the second wave. The prospect of sinking the ship in the channel and thus blocking access to Pearl Harbor was a very, very improbable outcome. However, the pilots couldn't resist the opportunity, so they attacked from 2 directions. 14 to 18 valves dropped against Nevada. Nevada was hit 5 times by 9 o'clock. And at 9:10, she had to beach herself. This was the shining moment of the second wave. But it deserves to be criticized. Did they contribute to sinking a battleship? Yeah, but it was by the rarest of luck. Nevada succumbed not to Japanese bombs, but to poor material condition, critical design flaws, and a massively significant damage control mistake. And again, it still doesn't make it any wiser. The battleship should have been avoided. The attempt to sink Nevada in the channel was a waste of ordnance that could have been better employed against targets more vulnerable to their effects. 1 to 3 dive bombers went for California, scoring 1 hit. The USS Pennsylvania, the fleet's flagship, the only battleship in dock, was also poorly selected. 9 bombers went after her. She suffered only a single hit at 9:06. The real victims, though, were the 2 destroyers ahead of her, which received collateral damage. 2 hit the Cassin and 1 hit the Downs, heavily damaging both. So there could be a cultural explanation to why the Japanese pilots went for battleships. These young 20-year-old pilots were going into the most significant battle in Japan's history. No one wanted to go back home and report that they attacked a simple cruiser or a destroyer. No way. They wanted to go for battleships.
People rarely mention this idea. Oh my god, yeah. And because people rarely mention, I rarely think of it. But yeah, this is true because of Japanese culture at the time. And honestly, most cultures, I think probably, like, if Americans were to do a similar attack on a Japanese thing, and it was full of young volunteers that wanted to prove themselves, and they were given specific targets but chose to go for, say, Japanese battleships or Japanese carriers or something, when instead they were told to target something else, I could see it happening. Like, young people young people in war kind of sometimes want to prove themselves. They don't want to attack a simple cruiser, right? Because that doesn't sound as cool as, hey, I bombed a fucking battleship, right? So, yeah, that's, wow. Wow. That's, damn, Montemayor, making me
True
think.
to their samurai spirit. But overall, the second wave attack was just scattered throughout Pearl Harbor, with many attacks missing their targets. A puzzling target selection was the destroyer USS Shaw, which was targeted by as many as 15 bombers.
Why?
3 bombs hit her, one of which unleashed a tremendous fireball. The reason to her being targeted was probably because she was in a floating dry dock and resembled a capital ship.
I guess.
On the west side, the Curtis, a sea tender, was inexplicably targeted. A damaged FAL committed a suicide dive and crashed into her, and minutes later, she was hit by a bomb. And lastly, the only hit on a top priority target was on the Raleigh. As many as 5 dive bombers went for her, still listing from that torpedo hit. She was hit once at 9:08. Also, we can add a near miss on the Honolulu, which caused minor damage.
I really like how he's color coordinated this, right? He's got a lighter orangish red as very badly damaged, and then just plain red as sunk or good destroyed, and then the yellow for like hit a little bit. That's really neat. I like
so
that
only
a lot.
one hit and one
Makes it
damage
really
near
easy to
miss
follow.
were achieved on the dive bomber's highest priority targets. Against the 55% accuracy rate achieved during their training, the pilots got only 15 hits. That's a rather disappointing 19% hit rate.
Ooh, damn.
It was a poor performance of the second wave. It contributed nothing substantial to the fleet in Pearl Harbor. Also, as in the case of the armor-piercing bombs, the general-purpose bombs were deficient. But the second wave had the opportunity to be more damaging. Take, for example, the Phoenix here, a modern cruiser which was completely
The USS Phoenix would later be sold to the Argentinian Navy and become the ARA General Belgrano. She would be sunk during the Falklands War.
ignored by the second wave, not to mention the first wave of
Damn,
torpedo bombers.
That's weird.
She was a suitable target. But even more telling was the fact that the naval yard was basically ignored. 4 modern 10-ton cruisers were tied up here, all of them packed so closely together. One could hardly have missed anything of value had the attack been concentrated here.
Good
On
point.
top of
yeah.
this, these ships were in a very vulnerable position. Flammable materials were scattered throughout, hatches were open, fire main systems might have been isolated. A bomb hit here would have caused a tremendous fire and been particularly devastating. And there was no smoke around this area at all. The Japanese missed a chance to deliver a more effective blow. Only about 10 dive bombers attacked this area, and as previously mentioned, only a damaged near miss caused any damage whatsoever. By 9:30, the attack was over.
Huh.
The attack left behind 2,335 people dead and another 1,178 wounded. Civilian casualties totaled 103, including 68 dead. 5 battleships have been sunk, but only 2 were permanent losses, the Arizona and the Oklahoma. The rest were repaired and served before the war's end. The other 3 battleships at Pearl Harbor suffered light damage.
Huh.
However, this attack didn't really cripple the Pacific Fleet. Soon the Japanese would realize that it wasn't these old, obsolete battleships that posed the real danger to them. It was the carriers that they had missed. They would soon feel their vengeance half a year later.
Is true.
To the list we can add a target ship and a mine layer, and the repair ship Vestal, which was beached. There was heavy to moderate damage to 3 destroyers, 2 light cruisers, and a sea tender. And there was light damage to a light cruiser. The Japanese also achieved great success on their strikes on the airfield spread out on Oahu. Over 160 planes were destroyed. They destroyed 2 to 3 times the number of aircraft that they had expected. The Japanese lost only 29 planes, 9 in the first wave, 20 in the second wave, a testament to the Americans' quick air defense. Also, none of Japan's 5 midget submarines made it back. Was the mission accomplished?
No.
Well, yes. All 4 battleships hit by torpedoes were out of the war for 6 months or more, and they had sunk 1 other battleship by bombs alone. And with that, the Kido Butai sailed back home, unscathed. World War II had just started for America, and the sneak attack left behind a temporary shocked nation, but a nation that afterwards would be resolved to finish the war with nothing less than a total victory on their side. The Japanese had awoken a sleeping giant.
Good video. I have not. Wow, that was. You know what? I did learn some stuff. I learned about how much of a failure this attack was on the Japanese side. I mean, I knew it was not nearly as successful as initial, or as well as, I guess, predictions. Japanese predictions were wanting the battle to go. So it was really cool to see the actual numbers. What else? I really loved the color coordination there on the damaged ships. That made it really easy to follow, because this is a surprise attack and it can be kind of frantic explaining like all these different ships getting bombed. So like then seeing the color makes it really easy to follow. But yeah, this was a really good video. Smart Man would be putting this out on December 7th, but I don't think I will be. But I think I will have a video to go for. I will get a video recorded for December 7th, relating to Pearl Harbor. So yeah, unless of course I end up changing things around and make this the Pearl Harbor or the December 7th video. I don't know. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Leave a suggestion down below for what you want to see me react to next. And see you guys in the next video. Thank you.